Howdy, my worthy friend. Most of us know what it feels like to be hit by something that we did not see coming and then wonder why we can't handle life in the way that we used to before we were hit and damaged. And if you're wondering how my encounter with a very real shark has anything at all to do with what you're carrying right now, well, you actually are in the right place. Because what I learned in those muddy waters helped me understand why helplessness can feel like weakness, why fear can shut us down, and what we can do before we start blaming ourselves. And by the end of this cup of coffee, I want to give you 3 handles you can use when life hits hard and you start wondering what happened to your strength. So let's go back to Galveston, because it all started with a sand dollar. Now, that morning did not start off like some survival movie. I slipped out of the vacation house while my college bandmates were still asleep. It was just after 5 in the morning, and one of the nearby houses already smelled like bacon frying. The world felt very ordinary, safe, almost lazy. And I wasn't looking for danger. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was looking for a perfect sand dollar before the beachcombers picked the beach clean. Something small, simple, beautiful. And that's often how it starts, isn't it? The thing that changes everything doesn't usually announce itself. Sometimes it shows up on a morning that just smells like breakfast. So I walked down to the beach, young enough to believe that if I had a plan, the world would probably cooperate. And then the ocean changed the plan. A rogue wave knocked me down, and then another one came up behind it. And before I understood what was happening, I was under the surface, tumbling, losing my shirt, my flip-flops, being dragged across the bottom and pulled out into Galveston Bay by a rip current. Not a little too far, way too far. So far that land became this thin line that I could only see when I was on the top of a wave. And before the shark ever showed up, I was already in deep trouble. And that's the first handle. Name the current. Before you ask, why am I not handling this better? Ask, what was already pulling against me? Now, maybe it was responsibility or grief. Maybe it was a dream that kept getting pushed further away. Maybe it was a season of your life that nobody else could see what you were going through. Because sometimes the thing that hits you doesn't hit while you're standing on solid ground. It hits when you're already tired and fighting to stay afloat. But naming the current is only the first part. Because sometimes the current isn't what changes you most. Sometimes it's the hit. Now, I kept swimming against the current. I'd get exhausted. I'd flip over on my back to breathe. And then I'd roll over to fight again. And I'd seen the fins pass near me, close enough that I could have reached out and touched them. So I floated as long as I could, hoping that that shark would just go on. But eventually, I was getting further from shore. The current was pushing me out. And I knew that if I had any chance at all, I had to start swimming again. So I rolled over, and something came up under me and smashed my left thigh like a truck. It hit so hard that it lifted me completely out of the water. And for one strange and impossible second, I was sitting on the top of a massive shark looking down at those eyes and those teeth. And then we slid back down into the muddy bay. You couldn't see your hand 6 inches under the water, and I couldn't see it. I couldn't feel my lower leg. The pain in my thigh was white hot, and I thought my leg was gone. And I waited, but there was no bite, no blood in the water, just shock, pain, and nerve damage that I still carry decades later. And that's the second handle. Name the shark that hit you. What hit you hard enough to change the rules of the fight? Not everything that wounds us leaves a visible mark. A betrayal can hit, a diagnosis, a layoff, a loss, a long season of being unseen can hit. And after the shark hits you, one of the cruelest questions we can ask ourselves is, why can't I do this like I did before? But maybe the better question is, what changed? Because if the fight changed, then judging yourself by the old fight rules may be the wrong measurement. But even that isn't the full answer. Because once you name the current and name the shark, you still have to ask one more question. What do I need now? And after hours in that bay, after the current and the shark and the sun, I finally got close enough to shore to believe that I might survive. Almost. And then my body gave out on me. My injured leg cramped, my strength ran out, and I started sinking into that muddy water. And I was so angry. After everything I had survived, I was still going to die close enough to see safety. And then I felt a hand grab my wrist. A surfer had seen me. He came out to help someone who could no longer help himself. And I couldn't even hold on to the surfboard. So he put the ankle strap around my wrist and he towed me in. And that's the third handle. Name the help that you need. Not because you're weak, because you're human. What help do you need now that you may not have needed before the shark hit you? Maybe it's a trusted friend, maybe it's rest, maybe it's counseling, maybe it's a community where you don't have to pretend that a shark didn't just knock the breath out of you. And yes, that's part of why we are building here at Live Worthy You. Not because we're the only answer, but because I know what it's like to need a hand when you're close to shore and still can't make it in alone. So if you feel weak, don't start by asking what's wrong with me. Start with these 3 questions. What current was I already fighting? What shark hit my life? What help do I need now that I didn't need before? And that changes the question. Because the question isn't always, why am I weak? Sometimes the question is, what happened to me? What did it change? And what do I do and need now that the fight is different? This is part of what I call human erosion. It's what happens when life and people, systems, responsibility, disappointment, or pain keep wearing down someone who's already trying to stay afloat. And it doesn't mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean that you're less worthy. But if you don't name it honestly, you can spend years of your life blaming yourself for wounds that affect you but were never your fault. See, the shark hit once, but the false story keeps hitting every time you say something like, I should be over this. I should be fine. I should be stronger by now. So stop comparing yourself to the version of you that existed before the shark hit your life. If the rules of the fight changed, your expectations of yourself may need to change too. And next time, I want to go back to before the current, before the shark, before the fight to reach shore, because I didn't walk into the bay looking for trouble. I was looking for a sand dollar, something simple, something beautiful, and that raised a question I think a lot of us carry. When wanting something good led you into pain, were you wrong to ever want it in the first place? And we'll talk about that next time. For today, remember this. Feeling helpless doesn't mean that you are weak. It may mean that something hit hard enough to change the fight. And no matter where you are along your journey, you deserve to live worthy, my friend.